We relocated to Kansas City from Los Angeles, California 4 years ago, and here are 5 lessons that we learned in the past 4 years. Lesson number 1 is that your happiness here in Kansas City will really depend on your expectations. Everybody knows that Kansas City is not Los Angeles. Big shock. Kansas City is not New York. Kansas City is not Miami. What Kansas City is a decently sized Midwest metro of 2 million people that can offer you everything if you have a certain perception of what the good life looks like for you. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. A lot of people comment on these videos and say, well, you can't go to the best concerts in Kansas City, or, well, you can't go to the beach in Kansas City, or yeah, the Kansas City nightlife is just simply not the best. And you know what? They're absolutely right. For us, Kansas City is the best because we have a young family. We're raising our young family here, and my kids are 4, 2, and we're expecting another one in May.
You're an animal.
Our whole schedule is family oriented. We are not the young attractive couple that we once were before we had kids. I am no longer the 23-year-old single dude who used to bum on the beach. Look, when I was living in Los Angeles, California, I had a friend who owned a house right on Seal Beach. In my 20s, we would go there every single weekend, and we would hang out, eat tacos at like 11:30 at night, play video games, and then the next day we would hang out on the beach trying to talk to girls.
You look pretty.
Look, if that's your reality and that's what you want out of life, then Kansas City is probably not going to do it for you. But fast forward over a decade, now I'm a father, I have 2 kids, cost of living is super important to me. Providing for my family is super important to me. Being able to build a legacy of saving for my kids is super important to me. Having a lot of family-friendly activities in the metro is very, very important to me. That's not to say that every other city in America isn't going to provide these things to some degree, but Kansas City does it very, very well. It is a great balance between really good cost of living and also a lot of family-friendly activities. And also, if you want to throw in, we have a lot of shows and orchestras and performances come through Kansas City as well, so it's not a sleepy Midwest town. However, if you're expecting the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles, if you're expecting the bright lights of New York, that's just not going to be what Kansas City is. And if you move here expecting those things, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. However, if you move here expecting a Midwest metro where you have a ton of things to do for relatively cheap cost of living, I think you're going to enjoy it here. If you keep on watching until the end, I will chime in with the bonus 6th lesson that I learned that actually doesn't necessarily apply to just Kansas City, but could apply to anywhere you live.
Alright, double prizes!
Number 2 is that it really, really matters where you live in the Kansas City metro. Your happiness will be in part determined by where you choose to live in Kansas City. When we first moved to Kansas City, we moved to a suburb called Gladstone. What I would describe Gladstone is a very suburban part of Kansas City where a lot of the residents, at least on our street, were probably 50 years old and older. It was extremely quiet. When we got there, we would consistently forget to lock the front doors and the back doors, and we never got bothered. There was typically no crime on our street. Basically, it was just kind of a sleepy Midwest area. Unfortunately, with all that kind of quietness, there wasn't necessarily that much to do. If we wanted to go downtown, we would have to drive 20 to 30 minutes. More on that later, driving, pace of life. But we had to drive 20 to 30 minutes to go downtown, to go to some of the things that we wanted to do in downtown Kansas City. That wasn't necessarily a deal breaker, but Gladstone itself, at least to us, wasn't super, super exciting. It's a great place to raise your family. It has great schools. It has great neighbors. We still keep in touch with some of our neighbors in Gladstone today. It has a lot of great parks and walking trails. There's a lot of great things about Gladstone, but if you're looking for something busier, then you're going to like somewhere like Midtown. You're going to like somewhere like Brookside. You're going to like somewhere like Waldo, where the vibe is going to be usually typically young families. The vibe is going to have, there's going to be a lot of art. There's going to be a lot of food, a lot of people out and about walking around, great parks as well. And so we actually made the strange move of moving from a good school district in Gladstone, more about school districts later, a great school district in Gladstone to a lesser school district where we live right now in KC-Mo proper. We're going to talk about school districts later, but all this to say, where you pick to move to Kansas City is going to be a big factor in your happiness. I recently made a couple of videos about crime in Kansas City. Number one, I went to the 5 highest crime neighborhoods in Kansas City. The other one, I just talked about crime in general. If you want to avoid crime, your neighborhood is going to be super important. A lot of people, when they talk about Kansas City being a violent place, that's usually south of the river on the Missouri side. And if you watch the crime video, you will see that the statistics prove that to be true. So, if you are looking to relocate here to Kansas City and you want to pick the perfect neighborhood that's going to be right for you, then give us a call, 816-4MOVE-KC. Our team is ready to help you move here to Kansas City like we've helped tons of people do in the past few months. Along with it really mattering where you live, in Gladstone, we had access to this really bomb kind of community center and pool. We used to visit it. We had a pass when we lived up there, and we used to go all the time. Now that we live in Blue Hills, not so much. We're a little bit farther from the splash pads and the pools. And unfortunately, while we are a lot closer to downtown and all the other awesome things in Kansas City, a lot of the community events that the Gladstone Community Center would have are not necessarily applicable here. In Blue Hills, we actually have a Blue Hills HOA, and I really am glad that they're trying to do something to, unite our community. Unfortunately, they've kind of been hit and miss in terms of the community events that they've thrown. The one community event that we actually went to, it was a good time, but that was the only one in the 2 years that we've lived here now. So we also have the kind of unique experience of living in a lower crime neighborhood in Gladstone, and then now living in a higher crime neighborhood in Blue Hills, and comparing and contrasting the differences here. And we can say that down here, we actually enjoy it a lot more. We love our neighborhood. We love the fact that we live on the same street as a couple of church members and their families. We also love the fact that we are super close to Nelson Atkins, super close to Science City, super close to Union Station, all those things that our family enjoys doing. However, I would say the community events in Gladstone were much, much better and more well organized than when we live here down south in Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, number 3 lesson is that city pride is real and it actually matters for the city. I found this quote. I thought this is pretty funny. I'm going to share it with you. It says, "No town adores itself like Kansas City. If Kansas City was a band, it would wear its own t-shirt on stage at the concert." I thought that was super funny, and I think that is super accurate. I've been to a lot of different cities in my life, and of course you'll see the person wearing like a Los Angeles shirt in Los Angeles or the Philadelphia shirt in Philadelphia. You see a lot of people repping their teams, right? If you go to Boston, you're going to see people wearing their Boston Red Sox jerseys or their New England Patriots jerseys, and that's completely normal, and Kansas City does that too. But I'll tell you one thing that I haven't seen is that Kansas City has a lot of generic Kansas City merchandise made by manufacturers like Charlie Hustle, and they just have these, KC shirts. I have quite a few of them myself. You've probably seen them in my videos. You have these Kansas City branded merchandise for people who actually already live in Kansas City. It's the only city that I've been to and lived in where people consistently, and I'll tell you consistently, if you come here to visit, it's very, very true. People consistently dress like tourists within our own city. If you live in Kansas City, you probably have a few Kansas City t-shirts, and if you don't, look on Facebook Marketplace because people are always selling them. You can pick them up for pretty cheap. Now you'll say, yeah, everybody has hometown pride depending on where they're from. And you're certainly right. Growing up and being from Los Angeles, I would still tell people I'm from Los Angeles. Being from Los Angeles, I have tremendous pride in my Los Angeles roots. And I also have tremendous pride in my Los Angeles sports teams. But here's the thing that I think makes a little bit of a difference if you grew up in Los Angeles versus here in Kansas City. In Los Angeles, you have 2 professional basketball teams that you can root for. You have the Lakers, you have the Clippers. You have 2 professional Major League Baseball franchises that you can root for. I'm a Dodgers fan. However, you could be an Angels fan if you so choose. Okay, I'm a Lakers fan, but you can be a Clippers fan if you so choose. Right now, you have 2 NFL franchises. This wasn't always the case because when I was growing up, there were no NFL franchises, but now you have 2 NFL franchises. You can be a Rams fan or you can be a Chargers fan. I root for the Lakers, Dodgers, and the Chargers. Still do. They're in my LA roots. However, with it being so bifurcated, you have some people who root for the Clippers, some people who root for the Lakers. I mean, let's keep it real. Nobody roots for the Clippers, right? But you have some people who root for the Angels and some people who root for the Dodgers. Here in Kansas City, you just have the Royals. You just have the Chiefs. You just have Sporting Kansas City, which, if you didn't know, is huge here. That's our Major League Soccer team. That's huge here. People here love soccer. And people unite over these teams. You can't imagine how crazy Kansas City went the night the Chiefs won their last Super Bowl. I heard it was pandemonium here when the Royals went to back-to-back World Series and won one. I mean, it is absolutely crazy because people here in the Midwest, we unite around our teams. And I think that also causes a lot of city pride to be built up. Even though I'm a Chargers fan, I still will root for the Chiefs if they're not playing the Chargers because I know that everybody in Kansas City is going to be so much happier if the Chiefs win rather than the Chiefs losing. And you know what? They've been winning a lot these past few years. And so a lot of people in Kansas City are really, really happy. I don't want to get too philosophical about this, but I think there is some type of unity that when our teams are doing well and when there are a lot of people out and about and a lot of people thinking positively about Kansas City, there is definitely a city spirit that kind of unites a lot of different people here in Kansas City, and I would say that the tenor around the city right now is very positive. There's a lot of new construction. There's a lot of success in our sports teams. There's a lot of people who are moving here, relocating here, finding it as a hidden gem that they have never considered before, and a lot of these things are interconnected. There's a lot of optimism around the city right now, and you're going to see it if you come to visit here. You're going to see it especially if you move here. A lot of people absolutely love being here, calling themselves Kansas Cityans. Myself included, being from Los Angeles, I consider now Kansas City my hometown because it has given me so much of what I've wanted, which is the ability to provide for my family, the ability for my wife to stay at home, the ability for us to have more kids and not necessarily worry about the increasing costs. Of course, we have the same regular anxieties that parents worry about. However, being here in Kansas City with such a low cost of living, but still all the activities that we could still want to do has been fantastic for us. Okay, speaking about kids a lot, number 4 lesson that we learned after living here after 4 years is that if you aren't thinking about schools when you're moving here, you should. I help a ton of clients who either don't have kids yet, have really, really young kids like ourselves when we moved here to Kansas City. And a lot of them will tell them, hey, Jalen, like we're worried about the crime, but really, you know, our kids, we don't have kids yet, or our kids are so young, we're not necessarily thinking about school yet, so school district doesn't necessarily matter. I will tell you, like I said before, we have the unique experience of living in both Gladstone, which is a higher ranked school district. It's not necessarily the best, like a, you know, Blue Valley in Overland Park or something like that, but it's certainly not a bad school district. We've had the unique experience of living in an area with a good school district and also an area with not necessarily a great school district. If you don't know, the Kansas City, Missouri school district is definitely not super high rated. When we were thinking about putting our kids in public schools, we were looking at like the math proficiency ratings and we were looking at the reading proficiency ratings, and they were very, very low. It has been a problem in the past with accreditation. I know that they have lost accreditation and regained it and lost it again and regained it. And so that stability is going to affect you, your home values. It's also going to affect the people who are going to be living in your neighborhood, because a lot of people do the opposite of us. They move from a worse school district to a better school district. In fact, I had a client who moved from Kansas City proper, sold their house there, and then moved to Olathe to put their kids in a better school district. That's very, very common. So that's going to be one thing that you're going to want to be thinking about. Even if you don't have kids, even if you have very young kids. When we moved here, Keller, our oldest, was only about 3 or 4 months old. Now he's almost 5 years old. And if we weren't homeschooling, we would have to be thinking about where he's going to go for schools. That hits you so fast. I mean, I can't tell you that when Emily and I wind down for the day, we're either sitting on the couch or we're about to get into bed or something like that, we always pull up our phones and we share the pictures of the kids that we took that day. And we sometimes will go back, we sometimes call it falling into a Keller hole or an Augie hole. And we'll look all the way back into their pictures from when they were just, newborns, when they were just babies. And it doesn't seem like that long ago. And now I've got this super active, super fun, almost 5-year-old on my hands. And now we have to make these big decisions like how are we going to school him? Where is he going to go to school? So don't disregard those decisions just because you think that they can be farther out. They can come on you a lot faster than you think. So if you're thinking about moving to Kansas City, here's my advice. If you're not sure about school districts, you know what? I make my living as a real estate agent trying to help people buy homes. So you're going to hear this from me. You might want to rent for a little bit so that you can check out the different areas in Kansas City. You might want to do that. Yes, you're going to not necessarily be building equity in a hot market like Kansas City, but you also will be protecting yourself from not making a good financial decision. Look, rent for a year. Let's still connect. Let's talk. Let's have some barbecue. Let's take you around to some neighborhoods so that in a year, when you're ready to buy, our team will be ready to help you. Okay, my lesson number 5. Again, stick around until the very end for a bonus lesson. Lesson number 5 is that pace of life will really affect your mental psyche here, okay? When I lived in Los Angeles, my very last years in living in Los Angeles, I worked as a pastor for the last 10 years, but for a few of those years, I was working part-time as a pastor, full-time as a third grade teacher, okay? I lived about 4 miles away from the school where I lived in Los Angeles. And sometimes it would take me 20 to 25 minutes in the morning to drive there, and then 20 to 25 minutes in the back to drive back. I can't tell you how much that affects your psyche when you're having to sit in almost an hour of traffic to go 8 miles. Just because it's Los Angeles, okay? Yeah, there would be some times where it'd be clear. It'd only take me 8 minutes that it's supposed to take me. But a lot of the times, these freeways, the 605, the 210, they'd be just completely jam-packed with cars, and you would be going at, 25 miles an hour if you were lucky, usually 10 to 15 miles an hour just at a creep. Okay, if you've lived in a very crowded metropolitan area, you know what I'm talking about. I'll tell you that Kansas City is not that, at least not yet. Okay, there's a lot of people moving here and it's getting more crowded. I can even feel it from 4 years ago, but it's still not to the levels of super, super crowded, overpopulated Los Angeles, California. Okay, now I drive far, far more than I ever drove as a third grade teacher, as a pastor living in Los Angeles. I mean, last year I probably racked up, I think, like close to 40,000 miles on my car, if you can believe it. Okay, showing houses, going to listings, driving all over the metro. I mean, there were some showings that I drove, 2 hours each way. But what I will tell you is that I would rather drive and not have any traffic than drive a short way every day being stuck in traffic. That's going to be one thing. When you come to Kansas City, the traffic here, comparatively, if you're moving from big city, it's like nothing. If you're moving from a larger metro area, then you are going to really enjoy the pace of life that not having traffic affords you. Let me tell you one last story before I get to the bonus point. When we first got here to Kansas City, we were driving down a street called Grand Avenue. We realized that we went too far past and we needed to make a U-turn. I didn't necessarily want to, turn all the way down these different side streets to get us back where we needed to go, so I needed to make a U-turn. I basically looked around, there was nobody on the street, made a U-turn, got back to where we needed to go. That was in the heart of downtown Kansas City. I could never imagine doing that maneuver in downtown Los Angeles. I could try to imagine it, but it would be, 15 different people honking at me, people, cussing me out and doing all this kind of stuff, because when I used to make deliveries in Los Angeles when I was 20 or 21 years old, starting at my first job, I used to make deliveries all over downtown, and it was absolutely crazy pandemonium driving, and that was over 15 years ago now. Okay, so I'll tell you that that pace of life here in Kansas City is just so much better than living in Los Angeles. Okay, so here's the bonus thing that I've learned after living in Kansas City for 4 years. And this doesn't necessarily pertain to Kansas City, but I think that it has some things to do with Kansas City. And I think that your happiness in terms of where you live is going to largely depend on your community. We have a fantastic church. I have a fantastic family. We have a lot of different friends. And in fact, like I said before, we have 2 church families that live right on the same street. We see each other multiple times a day. We can easily walk to each other's house. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, we have dinner all the time. In fact, tonight we're having some former clients turned really good friends over for dinner tonight. It's just an awesome time to have community and friendship. And I would say that this probably applies to wherever you live. Whether you decide to move here to Kansas City, whether we decided to live in California, whether we decided to move all the way up to, Alaska or something like that. Your community is probably going to dictate your happiness for most of the time. So I have a lot of people coming here saying, hey, Jalen, how do I find community in Kansas City? I would say, look, we're Christians. we have a church, okay? If you're a Christian too, we welcome you to come to our church to find community there, because I think our church does community super well. If you're not Christian, I've also found a lot of different community through my various hobbies and activities, okay? I really enjoy playing golf. And so immediately I got on our Facebook page, KC Golf, made a ton of friends there. Some friends even became clients, and I got to help them sell their house and move them. I always have somebody to golf with. I have a group text thread that I basically say, hey, looking to golf this Saturday, anybody down? And I guarantee you at least 1 or 2 people will be down to hang out. So lean hard into your hobbies. If you're not, if you don't have any hobbies and you don't go to church, well then I would suggest that you maybe pick up a hobby, because the Kansas City Metro is so big that there are going to be people who share certain hobbies with you. So that's what I would suggest in terms of community. And if you move to an area with an HOA, or if you move to a nice neighborhood where they throw really good community events, then get out into your neighborhood and get going and get meeting people. You won't build community anywhere, even the friendliest of places, if you don't make an attempt to do that.